Well, welcome to the next edition of Business Law Focus. It's great to have ENS executives Andries Myburg and Ntebeleng Sekabate with us today, and they from the mining department at ENS, and they've also been watching closely and have been attending the mining conference, which had a hiatus of 2 years with COVID, and we're back. And there's obviously been a lot of talk about the commodity cycle and where we're going. Policy in South Africa is obviously a big hindrance. And maybe if you guys can just give us a sense of what you saw from the mining indaba that's positive, and maybe what's also a little bit negative and that we need to overcome.
Hi, Evan. Good afternoon. Yeah. So I think the positive I took from the indaba is that actually, that President Ramaphosa was one of the keynote speakers, where traditionally it would typically only be the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. He also obviously had a keynote address, but I think what was key for me is that President Ramaphosa again referred to the mining industry in South Africa as a sunrise industry. So he also referred to that in 2018 in his SONA address when he, the first time. And I think he also recognized there are some challenges that as a country we have to overcome in order to encourage investment into the mining industry. So I think that for me was quite a key positive. So, if you look 10 years ago, I think Citibank issued a report where they indicated that South Africa has the largest in situ mineral resources in the world. And I think at that time, which is 10 years ago, they estimated it to be $2.5 trillion that the country's mineral deposits. And also, South Africa dominated the platinum group metals, which at that time was accounted for 80% of the global reserves, manganese 80%, chrome 72%, vanadium 32%, gold was at that stage 3%. But it's a vast mineral resource. So the is how do you encourage investment, especially in the mineral exploration area? But I think he indicated the cadastre system. There's some challenges for the transparency of the mining license, the red tape around all the regulation, etc. But I think the focus has been, the last year or two, with a lot of the industry players like the Minerals Council who lobbied it. And I think if all the role players can come together, I think South Africa can be a great destination for investment.
Yes, and of course, when it comes to these investment decisions, which are very important, policy factors tend to weigh significantly, right, in South Africa.
Yes, that's right, Evan. Hi, and thanks for having me. We see that policy factors together with mineral potential are taken into account when investors make the decision on which jurisdiction to invest in. So policy factors are indeed quite an important consideration.
And what exactly is wrong, though, when it comes to policies in South Africa? This came up, it was topical. There was a discussion about it and some confusion as well as to, from the government side as to what's needed and, the plans that are in place and claims of success, and the reality on the ground. What do we actually need to do to get this right? Because as you mentioned, Andries, there's the significant endowment and potential in South Africa is just not being harnessed.
I think there was a survey released by the Fraser Institute where it ranked various jurisdictions by investment attractiveness. And what they took into account was both policy factors as well as mineral potential. And we didn't do well at all. I think for the first time, South Africa slipped into the bottom 10 jurisdictions in respect of the attractiveness for investors. And it was obviously quite a disappointing result considering our mineral endowments and how we have been blessed with all these minerals across the range. We don't just have sort of a homogeneous mineral endowment. We do have things like coal and gold and PGMs and manganese and all sorts of minerals. But it seems like what let us down with the policy factors.
Yep.
And after this survey was released, the DMRE issued a strategy document where they identified some of the weaknesses of the mining sector as far as attracting global investment. And some of those weaknesses were identified as energy instability. So we all know about the energy problems that the country has been facing. And that, of course, is applicable to everybody across the board, including mining companies and prospecting companies, as well as infrastructure challenges, such as, our rail infrastructure and our road infrastructure. We are facing some challenges with that. And we have seen with the increase in the coal price, there's suddenly been huge production by the coal miners, but they are struggling to get the coal down to the ports for purposes of exports and so on. So now they have to get trucks on the road. So these infrastructure challenges obviously are quite a dampener to the attractiveness of South Africa as an investment destination. We also have unsatisfactory policy implementation. So we have very nice policies on paper, but it appears as if we struggle to implement the policies that we have. An example is the challenge with the process for the issuing of mining and prospecting rights and permits that can take quite a long time, and that can obviously lead to a bit of frustration and discouragement. Another thing we need to deal with is the industrial action and community unrest. And one of the big things at the mining endeavor this year was social license to operate. So obviously the people who live in the communities where the mines operate want to see that they participate, they have active participation, and there's benefits that flow down to them, which might be a challenge that we are experiencing currently at the moment. So I think we are aware of the challenges that we are experiencing from a mining perspective. It's just now what to do about it.
You mentioned the DMRE's exploration strategy for the mining industry, specifically, in practical, real economic terms. Is it just more talk, or, is this actually something that we can do? And I know we want to get as well to some of the incentives that we could look at, but just looking at it, are there still holes? Are there things missing? Is it just more talk?
Well, Evan, I think the first step to solving the problem is to identify the problem, right? So at least now we have a document that sets out what exactly the problems are. And there's a very ambitious vision sort of set out in the document. Currently, we only attract 1% of international exploration budgets. And the department is aiming to get that up to 5% by 2025. So, that's quite an ambitious goal to have, and hopefully we will start moving in the right direction with implementing the strategy that's set out in that document.
Yeah, and of course incentives is the big issue. You need these incentives, and possibly, is this doable? Can we implement enough incentives to encourage this investment in light of this policy challenge that you're talking about?
Yeah, Evan, maybe I can come in there. I think it's debatable, and if you look at the budget speech earlier this year, the Minister of Finance indicated they actually want to move away from the incentives being in the Income Tax Act. But I think if you look at the Canadian flow-through model, for decades they successfully have implemented the so-called flow-through sharing incentive in Canada, both at the federal and at the state level. And so I think that has been successful. And I think in the past, I think Treasury were reluctant also to introduce a similar type of incentive, especially for mineral exploration in South Africa, because I think the reason they looked at it, and even the Davis Committee, tax committees considered that, and they say, well, the incentive is not necessarily the sort of standalone, that will attract investment. I think they indicated that the lack of policy certainty and predictability is more a sort of restrictive. But I think, with the Minerals Council, all the players the last year or two, lobbying this thing, I think they want to improve the cadastral system. They have a few hiccups, but I think it looks to me a positive for me is that the various mineral departments or the various government departments is actually starting to work together to actually get it. And I think it's time now for Treasury to relook at a similar type of incentive to be introduced because all of that added together, I think, will be quite a nice, attractive, for a foreign investor. We talked about earlier on what are the issues. I think South Africa, if compared to the other African jurisdictions, yes, we have some challenges with our infrastructure like rail and road and ports, but I think, if you compare that to many of the other jurisdictions, I think if one can operate and maintain that infrastructure properly and manage it properly, I think together with this potential incentive, and also get a regulatory certainty and the policy certainty, then I think there's, quite a nice, attractive opportunity. I referred earlier to that Citibank report 10 years ago about that mineral wealth, that's untapped mineral wealth in South Africa. So I think, if all those departments start working together, including National Treasury, I think, that would be definitely the time now to consider, introducing a similar incentive.
Yeah, and interestingly, since that Davis report actually came out talking about incentives, you mentioned the flow-through element there, not really finding too much favor, but we've actually seen exploration investment down, right, since that happened.
Yeah, even exactly. Tabeleng mentioned that report says it's not even close to 1%, and they want to get it up to 5%. I think we must all now, all the various role players must work together. And I think, if we're not going to, put something in there, Treasury, try and put it in there and see if it works, you'll never know if it works. So I think it's now the time. Even President Ramaphosa, as I mentioned earlier, referred it to as a sunrise industry. So if we want to keep it to be a sunrise industry, I think now is the time to introduce it. And the Minerals Council has, around about 2020, sort of made the whole proposal to Treasury on a suggested adapted type of flow-through incentive to Treasury. So I think that just needs to be dusted off, and Treasury needs to seriously look at that and involve the Minerals Council, other role players, to see how to implement that. As you mentioned previously, we have this mineral strategy, but is it all talk? Well, we need to start action that now.
Yeah. The exploration budget in South Africa has decreased from $400 million in 2007 to under $100 million, according to recent numbers in 2018. That's really significant. And I know, and Tabeleng brought in as well the DMRE, and other factors also that are weighing, and maybe you can just give me a sense as well from the Indaba is, certainly we're knowing with the power cuts, energy instability for a long period going forward is a big factor. Road and rail infrastructure challenges are other major hindrances, right, that tie into this unsatisfactory policy environment.
I don't know, Tabeleng, if you want to jump in there, but I think that's what President Ramaphosa, he recognized that, and I think, as you mentioned, I think all these documents and policies that has been introduced is now it's there. I think everybody just now have to action that, and I think it's not just one or the other role players. All role players must start working together and move into the right direction. So for me, as I mentioned, I think the infrastructure is there. Some of it is dilapidated and all of that, and the planning and the maintenance and the operation is not there. But I think if we can get all of that together with potentially introducing this tax incentive, that will maybe, encourage a foreign investor instead of putting their money into the DRC, for example, actually decide to put it into South Africa, So I think we must, as a government and all the role players, must do all in order to actually, action all of this potential.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, we want to secure a minimum of 5% share in global exploration investment in 5 years. I mean, maybe if I could just conclude with both of you, do you guys think that that's doable from what you've just seen in the Indaba? It'll obviously take a lot of commitment, but do you guys see it happening in 5 years, or is that just going to be something that may be pushed out?
From my perspective, Evan, I think, the focus now seems to have shifted to sustainability.
Yeah.
A big theme of the mining Indaba was sustainability, and particularly environmental and social and governance sustainability. So we have a big opportunity here to think of more sustainable ways to reinvigorate the mining sector specifically, and the whole world is moving towards that. So I think we have a very nice opportunity here to just reinvent ourselves and see how we can be more sustainable, include the communities into the mining process or whatever. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity there. Yes, we do have obstacles and challenges, but I think that is not necessarily unique to South Africa. And if we do start taking the necessary steps, then we can definitely get there by 2025, in my view.
Yeah, I think even just to add to that, I think, if one say 5 years, that's not a long time, and 5 years can go by quickly. So I think, unless everybody start doing something, I think if everybody just action that and actively work towards it, we probably won't need the 5% by then at least. But if if we don't try from the outset and all the role players come together, then you will never know. So I think only time will tell. But I think at least there's some positive noise. So let's just see if everybody can pull together in the right direction and that be the aim and try and get there. If not actually get there, in 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. Sustainability critical, because that's long term and it's entrenched and it's real. I like that. And then obviously the commitment is critical. So I think that's fabulous. Great input, guys. Great chatting. Thanks for giving us that update from the Indaba. I know you've just come back from it, and it's been great chatting. Thanks very much.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you, Evan.